Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. In the previous session, we have completed the steps of hemostasis. In today's lecture, we are going to talk more about the different aspects of hemostasis, and we are going to cover three important topics. The first topic that we are going to talk about is prevention of blood clotting in normal vascular system. The second topic that we are going to discuss is anticoagulants in the clinical use. And thirdly, we will talk about different coagulation tests. So we will start with the prevention of blood clotting in normal vascular system. If the life has to be normal, the blood must remain a fluid within the blood vessels. Now the question is, what are those factors that help in preventing intravascular clotting of blood? In the previous sessions, we have talked about that the blood contains the coagulation factors as well as it has anticoagulant factors in it. And in normal circumstances, under physiological conditions, the anticoagulant mechanisms dominate over the different coagulation factors which are present in inactive state in the blood. So now we are going to see what are those anticoagulation factors present in the blood. So there are three important anticoagulation factors in the body that prevent intravascular clotting of blood. The first factor is endothelial surface factors. Basically, this is a group of factors and are known as endothelial surface factors. Second are the chemical substances present in the blood which prevent the clotting of blood under normal conditions. And the third factor which acts as an anticoagulant mechanism is the vigorous circulation of the blood within the circulatory system. So first we are going to talk about the endothelial surface factors. Now the endothelial surface factors are the most important factors for preventing intravascular clotting of blood under normal circumstances. There are different factors. The first important endothelial surface factor is smoothness of endothelial surface. Now, normal endothelium is smooth and it does not allow the contact activation of factor 12 as well as the platelets. So, as long as there is smoothness of the endothelial surface, it will act as an anticoagulant factor by preventing the activation of the factor 12 as well as the platelets. Then, second endothelial factor is a layer of glycocalyx on the endothelium. This glycocalyx is basically a mucopolysaccharide and it repels the clotting factors as well as the platelets. I am repeating, the second endothelial factor is the layer of glycocalyx, which are basically mucopolysaccharides present on the surface of endothelial cell membranes, and it repels the clotting factors and the platelets. Now, third important endothelial surface factor preventing intravascular clotting of blood is a protein known as thrombomodulin. Now, thrombomodulin is a protein attached to the surface of endothelial cells. This protein binds with thrombin and therefore it decreases the amount of thrombin and it prevents the excessive spread of blood clotting mechanisms to the other regions of the body. In addition, the complex of thrombomodulin and thrombin activates a protein present in the plasma. This protein is known as protein C. Now, protein C, when it is activated by thrombomodulin thrombin complex, it causes inactivation of factor 5 and factor 8. So, there are three important endothelial surface factors. The first one is the smoothness of endothelial surface. which repels the clotting factors and the platelets and prevent their contact activation. Glycocalyx layer, which repels the platelets and the clotting factors. And the third endothelial factor is thrombomodulin protein attached to the surface of the endothelial cells, which binds the thrombin and reduces its amount. And in addition, it activates a protein known as protein C, which in turn activate the clotting factors 5 and 8. So this is the diagrammatic representation of what we have just discussed. So this is the endothelium, normal endothelium. So normal endothelium is smooth, so it will not cause the contact activation of platelets as well as factor 12. And and the thrombomodulin, which is attached to the endothelial surface, it will bind the thrombin, and this complex in turn is going to cause activation of protein C, and activated protein C in turn is going to cause inactivation of factor 8 and factor 5. Now, inactivation of factor 8 and inactivation of factor 5 will also reduce the formation of thrombin. So, clot formation will be restricted only to the place where it is needed, and it will not extend beyond this place. On the other hand, we can also say that when there is loss of endothelium or when there is damage to the endothelium, the endothelial surface factors are lost, and this cause contact activation of platelets and the factor 12, causing the activation of the intrinsic pathway of clotting, and which will result in clot formation. Now, the second anticoagulant mechanism are the chemicals present in the blood. In this regard, two substances are very important. The first one is heparin. It is a naturally occurring anticoagulant in our body. And then there are thrombin inhibitor substances. First, we are going to talk about the heparin. Heparin is a powerful anticoagulant, though it is present in low concentrations in the blood. It is a negatively charged mucopolysaccharide and is produced by the mast cells and the basophils, especially in the liver and lungs. Now, heparin by itself has little or no anticoagulant properties, but it produces its anticoagulant effect by binding or combining with antithrombin 3. Again, I am repeating the mechanism of action of heparin, that alone heparin, it has a little anticoagulant property, but it combines with antithrombin 3 to produce its anticoagulant effects. Antithrombin 3 is a protein present in the plasma. So when the heparin it complexes with antithrombin 3, it causes inactivation of certain clotting factors, which include factor 9, factor 10, factor 11, and factor 12. So the clotting factors inactivated by heparin antithrombin 3 complex are factor 9, factor 10, factor 11, and factor 12. That is how heparin is going to produce its anticoagulant effect. First, it will combine with antithrombin 3, and then the complex of heparin and antithrombin 3 is going to cause an activation of these clotting factors. Heparin is very important pharmacological agent in medical practice to be used as to prevent the intravascular clotting. So it has very important clinical use as an anticoagulant. Heparin can be prepared commercially by extracting it from different animal tissues, and it is given by intravenous injections. When it is given by intravenous injections, it increases the clotting time from a normal of about 6 minutes to about 30 minutes. The normal clotting time it ranges from 6 to 10 minutes, but when we give heparin as an injection or in form of intravenous injection, it increases the clotting time from 6 minutes to 30 minutes. The effect of heparin appears immediately, and this action, anticoagulant action of heparin, it lasts for about 1.5 to 4 hours. Heparin in the body is destroyed by the enzyme heparinase. So this is heparin anticoagulant. It is produced inside the body, as well as it can be prepared commercially from different animal tissues and can be used as as a pharmacological anticoagulant. Now the next chemical substances in the blood are the thrombin inhibitors, which produce anticoagulant effects. In thrombin inhibitors, three substances are important. The first one is antithrombin 3, the second is fibrin, and the third is protein C. So, in in thrombin inhibitors, we are going to talk about three substances. The first one is antithrombin 3. We talked a little bit about the antithrombin 3 in combination with heparin. Now, antithrombin 3 it has its effect on its own as well. Antithrombin 3 it binds with thrombin, and not only it blocks the action of thrombin on the fibrin, but it also inactivates the thrombin. So antithrombin 3 is present in the plasma, and this antithrombin 3 it binds with the thrombin. So when it binds with the thrombin, it will prevent the action of thrombin on the fibrinogen to convert it into fibrin. Secondly, it not only inhibits the activity of thrombin, but it also inactivates the thrombin. And in combination with heparin antithrombin 3 complex, it causes inactivation of the clotting factors that we just discussed. That factor 9, 10, 11 and 12 are inactivated by antithrombin 3 heparin complex. So these are two actions of antithrombin 3. Now next is fibrin. Now fibrin fibers are formed during the process of clot formation, but they also have antithrombin action. Now fibrin fibers which are formed during the process of clotting will absorb excess of thrombin, so that the clotting process is kept localized, and it does not extend into the other regions of the body. I am repeating that the fibrin fibers which are formed during the process of clotting also have antithrombin action. Fibrin absorbs excess of thrombin, and it keeps the clotting process localized and prevents its extension to the other regions of the body. Now this diagram shows us the functions of antithrombin substances. So antithrombin 3 is there. Antithrombin 3 जो है it inactivates the clotting factors in combination with heparin, which include the factor 11, 9, factor 10 and factor 12 as well. In addition, antithrombin 3 itself also binds and inactivates thrombin, so that it is not available for the conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin. And fibrin also has an antithrombin action by absorbing this thrombin. The third substance present in the blood is protein C. Now protein C is present in the plasma in inactive state. Thrombomodulin thrombin complex, it activates the protein C, It changes the inactive protein C to its activated form. And this activated protein C cause inactivation of factor 5 and factor 8. So these are different anticoagulant substances present in the body which prevent the clotting of blood. The third factor or the third anticoagulant mechanism is the vigorous circulation of the blood. So in the beginning we discussed that there are three anticoagulant mechanisms in the body, which are the endothelial surface factors and the chemical substances in the blood, and the third is the vigorous circulation of the blood. Now under normal circumstances, the vigorous circulation of blood is an important factor in preventing intravascular clotting. Why and how? This is because it keeps the formed elements of the blood, including the platelets, away from the vessel wall. I am repeating that the third anticoagulant mechanism in the blood is vigorous circulation of the blood within the vascular system, and in the normal circumstances it is an important factor because it keeps the formed elements of the blood, including the platelets, away from the vessel wall. So these platelets do not come in contact with the vessel wall and they are prevented from being activated. In conditions which are associated with stasis of blood, such as chronically ill patients who are bedridden, or the patients of congestive cardiac failure, or the patients of polycythemia, in all these conditions there is stasis of the blood or there is sluggishness of the blood flow. Now this stasis of the blood is associated with intravascular clotting. So vigorous circulation of the blood prevents the intravascular clotting, and slowness of the flow of blood or sluggishness of the blood flow can cause intravascular clotting. Now we will move on to the next topic, which are the anticoagulants for the clinical use. Now different anticoagulants are used in vivo as well as in vitro. In vivo means the anticoagulants are used within the body, and in vitro means the anticoagulants are used to prevent the clotting of blood outside the body. So in vivo use of anticoagulants, it is required in some thromboembolic conditions. There are certain conditions or pathological conditions in which body become prone to thrombosis and embolism, and in these conditions, to delay the process of coagulation we have to use different anticoagulants, and in this the important anticoagulants are heparin and coumarins. Now we have talked in detail about heparin, its mechanism of action. Now we are going to talk about the other group of anticoagulants, that are coumarins. Now coumarins are oral anticoagulants. Heparin, when it is used as an pharmacological agent, it is given intravenously, while coumarins uh, are used as an anticoagulant which are given orally. There are two important anticoagulants in this group. These include warfarin and dicumarol. The mechanism of action of coumarins is that they prevent clotting by inhibiting the action of vitamin K, by inhibiting the activation of vitamin K. Now we in the previous session we had discussed about the role of vitamin K in clotting. That vitamin K is required for formation of certain clotting factors, which are factor 2, 7, 9 and 10. Now these coumarins anticoagulants, they prevent or they inhibit the activation of vitamin K. Now, when vitamin K is inactivated, vitamin K dependent clotting factors will not be carboxylated and they will become biologically inactive. So, as a result, blood coagulation will be prolonged. After administration of an effective dose of warfarin, the coagulant activity of the blood it decreases to 50% of the normal by the end of 12 hours. Now, as compared to heparin, heparin has an immediate action, but in case of warfarin, which is used as an oral anticoagulant, the effect does not appear immediately. Instead, the coagulation activity is decreased to 50% of the normal by the end of 12 hours and to about 20% by the end of 24 hours. When we discontinue the warfarin therapy, coagulation time will return to normal in about 1 to 3 days. So the effect will be there for about 1 to 3 days even after discontinuation of warfarin, and after about 3 days the coagulation time will return back to normal. This was about the use of anticoagulants in the body, in vivo use of anticoagulants. Now, anticoagulants are also used for prevention of blood coagulation outside the body. Here again, we have two conditions or two situations. The first situation is the use of anticoagulants in different surgical procedures, like in dialysis or in cardiac surgery, where the blood has to be passed through heart lung machine or the artificial kidney. Now, in these situations, it is required that blood must not clot while it is passing through the heart lung machine or the artificial kidney. So, for this purpose, heparin is used to prevent clotting of blood. So, heparin is an anticoagulant which can be used in vivo as well as in vitro. Now, second situation is when we remove the blood from the body for different purposes and we have to prevent it from clotting. For example, we take a blood sample and we have to do certain test on this sample, and we want that blood should not be and we want that the blood should not be clotted. Then we have to use different anticoagulants. Even this also involves the storage of blood for blood transfusion purpose. So different mechanisms can be used for prevention of clotting of the blood outside the body. It can be done by use of siliconized containers. Now, siliconized containers have the surfaces that are very smooth and they prevent the contact activation of factor 12 and platelets. These containers, that are the siliconized containers, can delay the process of clotting for up to an hour. We can use the substances which decrease the level of ionized calcium in the blood to prevent the blood from clotting. Now, these substances include the oxalate compounds and the citrate compounds. Now, these oxalate and citrates bind with calcium present in the blood and it decreases the level of ionized calcium in the blood. And when calcium level is decreased, the blood will not clot. Now, when we compare the oxalate and the citrate compounds, citrates have an advantage over the oxalate anticoagulants because oxalate anticoagulants can be toxic to the body. So, I am repeating again that blood can be prevented from clotting when it is placed outside the body by use of siliconized containers, which can delay the process of clotting for about 1 hour, or the blood can also be prevented from clotting by use of anticoagulant substances For example, oxalate compounds and citrate compounds. And mechanism of action of these anticoagulants is that these bind with calcium present in the blood and decrease the level of ionized calcium. Since we know that calcium is required for almost all the steps of intrinsic and extrinsic pathway of clotting, so when calcium is decreased, blood will not clot. Now we will move on to the third topic of today's discussion, that are blood coagulation tests. So this slide shows you a number of tests which can be performed to check for the clotting profile of the patient. So these tests include the blood platelet count. We know that the normal platelet count is 150,000 to 300,000 per microliter or per cubic millimeter of blood. So if there is a decrease in the platelet count, the coagulation of the blood can be affected. Then the next test that can be done is the bleeding time. Then clotting time is performed. These are known as BT and CT. Bleeding time is indicated as BT and clotting time is indicated as CT. Then there is another test known as prothrombin time. It can also be performed to check for the coagulation profile. Then INR, which is International Normalized Ratio. Then activated partial thromboplastin time, which is known as APTT. I am repeating, activated partial thromboplastin time, which is known as APTT. So, and the third and the last test is plasma fibrinogen levels and fibrin degradation products. So, these are different tests which can be performed to check for the coagulation profile. And we are going to talk about the bleeding time, clotting time, prothrombin time, and INR in detail. So, first test that we are going to discuss is bleeding time. Now, bleeding time is the time interval from oozing of blood after a cut or an injury till the arrest of bleeding. So, bleeding time, again I am repeating, it is the time interval from oozing of blood after a cut or injury till the arrest of bleeding. This is determined by the Duke's method, and normal duration of bleeding time is about 1 to 6 minutes. In performing the test for bleeding time, a lancet is used to pierce the fingertip, or the earlobe, and the time of bleeding is noticed. Time taken till the stop of bleeding is noticed. Normal bleeding time is 1 to 6 minutes, and it is prolonged by the lack of platelets or when platelets are non-functional. Either there is deficiency, the count of platelet is decreased, or the platelets are functionally abnormal. In these two situations, the bleeding time can be prolonged. So this is how the bleeding time is, the test for the bleeding time is performed. The fingertip is pierced with the lancet, and then it is touched with the filter paper after a duration of about every 30 seconds, and with the help of a stopwatch, time is noticed and is calculated that how much time is taken for the arrest of bleeding. Next is test of clotting time. Now, clotting time is the time interval from oozing of the blood after a cut or injury till the formation of clot. So, this is the basic difference between the bleeding time and the clotting time. In bleeding time, that it is the time interval from oozing of blood to the stoppage of bleeding or to the rest of bleeding. And in bleeding time, we are checking the function of platelets, and there is platelet plug formation. Well, in case of clotting time, it is the time interval from the oozing of blood till the formation of clot. And in clotting time, there is formation of blood clot, and we are basically assessing the functions of different clotting factors. The normal duration of clotting time is 6 to 10 minutes, and it is prolonged if there is deficiency of the clotting factors, such as there is a condition known as hemophilia that we are going to discuss in the next lecture, inshallah. In hemophilia, there is deficiency of clotting factor 8, and due to deficiency of the clotting factor, the blood clotting is abnormal and clotting time is prolonged. So in the lab, we do the clotting time by capillary tube method, in which after piercing the fingertip with the lancet, the blood is collected in capillary tubes, and then these capillary tubes are broken after at the interval of about 30 seconds, till the time we observe a thread between the broken ends of the capillary tube. Now this thread basically it indicates the fibrin thread or the fibrin clot. So that's how we determine the clotting time. Here you can also see the formation of a fibrin thread or a clot present between the broken ends of the capillary tube. Next is prothrombin time. Now, prothrombin time is basically an indication of the concentration of prothrombin in the blood, and it is a measure of extrinsic pathway of clotting. Now, in determining the prothrombin time, the blood is removed from the patient and is immediately oxalated. It means that after taking the blood sample from the patient, oxalate anticoagulant is immediately added to the blood so that so that the thrombin is not formed. Then in the next step, a large amount of calcium ions and tissue factor is quickly mixed with the oxalated blood. Now the excess of calcium ion will nullify the effect of oxalate. Oxalate initially decreases the level of ionized calcium so that clotting does not take place. Then when we add large amount of calcium, it will nullify the effect of oxalate, and addition of tissue factor is going to cause activation of the activation of thrombin formation by extrinsic pathway, because we know that tissue factor it stimulates the extrinsic pathway of clotting. This tissue factor will cause activation of factor 7 in the blood, and factor 7 will cause activation of factor 10, and factor 10 will form the prothrombin activator complex, which will convert prothrombin into thrombin. So the time required for the coagulation to take place is known as prothrombin time, and it is noted. Now, normal prothrombin time is about 12 seconds. Prothrombin time can be increased in the liver diseases because of defective formation of the clotting factors. As we know that most of the clotting factors are formed by the liver. So, if there is a liver disease, there is defective formation or decreased formation of the clotting factors, including prothrombin, and prothrombin time will be prolonged. Then prothrombin time is also prolonged when there is deficiency of vitamin K, because vitamin K is required for the carboxylation and activation of the prothrombin. Then it can also be prolonged in when there is deficiency of clotting factors 1 clotting factor 2 itself is prothrombin, factor 5 and factor 10. Now the next is international normalized ratio, which is known as INR. Now this ratio, international normalized ratio, is a way to standardize the prothrombin time. It is the ratio of person's prothrombin time to a normal control sample, or we can say that the prothrombin time of a subject is compared with the normal prothrombin time. So it's a ratio of prothrombin time of a subject to the prothrombin time from a control sample, which is obviously normal. The normal INR is It ranges from zero point 0.9 to 2. If INR is increased, it indicates a high risk of bleeding or a bleeding tendency. And if INR is decreased, it indicates that there is chance of formation of a blood clot. So with this, we have completed the three topics for today. We talked about the anticoagulant mechanisms in the body. We talked about the anticoagulants used clinically within the body and outside the body to prevent the clotting of blood. And we have talked about different coagulation tests and how these are performed. I hope you understand the lecture, and if you have any difficulty, you can ask any question. Thank you so much.